Let's settle in. Let's settle in for our meditation time. Let's settle in for these few moments when we don't have to worry about taking care of the list and all the doing and all the thinking. But we can truly experience the sensation of just being. And so as you're beginning to physically settle and your eyes are closing or you're casting them down to a place where you're less distracted, just really give yourself a chance to connect to your breath, to connect to this moment, and start to just notice as you intentionally do that, where are the spots that are a little restless, both physically and mentally? And just be aware of that. We don't just tell ourselves just to be, to come to the present moment and it just happens, but we stay aware of the things that get in the way. And we start to understand the patterns of our thoughts. We understand the restlessness of our body. And then we continue to do things to interrupt those patterns until the distractions become fewer. So as you've begun to settle, let's just begin to breathe together. Collectively take a long, deep breath in and release it out. Breathing in and breathing out. And inhale and exhale. And you continue with your breath, with your rhythm. And I hope for you that those few just beginning breaths do the same that they do for me. It's like these buttons, these switches inside of me start to change. And again, it's not just a perfect ushering into the being state, but it is a conscious awareness that this is where I desire to be, here in this moment. And so we've been on this journey, understanding and kind of reflecting on the pillars of joy. These pillars that have been defined by someone that I put a lot of faith and confidence in when it comes to spiritual teachings, and that's the Dalai Lama. His sense of wisdom and compassion that he has for the world, regardless of a belief system or a culture. It just amazes me to think of how his messages from his culture and his religious beliefs can transcend past the borders that often separate us. And the same teachings he would share with his followers, he shares with us, and they apply to our lives as well. And he tells us that these 8 pillars, they become these anchors. Think about a pillar that holds up a structure. And when one pillar becomes damaged or it falters, the structure doesn't stand as it should. We need all 8. And so our awareness of these over these days together and in these days to come helps us to keep them at the focus, continuing to nurture and develop them. We started off with perspective. And so just pause here and just think, what has my perspective been like today? Did the weather affect your perspective? Did other people? Did traffic? What has your perspective been like? And then he took us through the second pillar of humility. Did you have the opportunity, or did you create the intention or the setting for your ability to feel humbled, to experience humility, this surrendering of your heart and your soul, this beautiful connection across the lines of humanity? Humility. And then he followed that one up with this idea of humor. And so I would ask each of us, did you laugh today? Did you have a moment where you just felt really good? And then we moved on to the pillar of acceptance. Were there things that happened today that maybe were not anticipated or didn't go the way that you had expected? But were you able to find acceptance even beyond the expectations? And then came the pillar of forgiveness. I think it's interesting that he gave us acceptance before he gave us forgiveness. And let's just think to ourselves, have we had the opportunity to forgive recently? And did we take the opportunity to forgive? And then came the pillar of gratitude. I love how forgiveness is just nestled right between the acceptance and the gratitude. Was there a challenge today or in the last few days that you could say right now, it wasn't easy, but I'm so grateful. I'm grateful for the opportunity, for the lessons, for the way that I've held myself firm throughout. And then came the seventh pillar, the one of compassion, both compassion toward others, and we cannot forget compassion toward ourselves. And we have this structure, this vessel of us, this body, this spirit, this mind that need all 8 pillars. And the 8th one, we're going to spend a few times talking about it and thinking about it and reflecting on it. It is the pillar of generosity. And so when I say that word, just picture something in your head. What do you see when you think about generosity? What does it look like? There's a joke that went on between the Dalai Lama and Desmond Tutu when they were talking about this idea of generosity, and they were joking and saying that God must not have been very good at math, because math would tell us that there needs to be this subtraction, that when you give something, basically now something is gone, right? It's subtracted. But that's not how it works in humanity. When we give, we receive. And when we give again, we receive again. It's not always the same thing that's reciprocated, but there is a receiving when we give. And there's this beautiful example that he shares about the necessity of generosity. And that's what I want us to think about for these few minutes today. How it's necessary. When we show up to meditation, or we show up on our yoga mat, or we sit in quiet reflection in nature, we are receiving. We are receiving good, peaceful, calm energy. When we stand next to someone in a physical yoga class, we're receiving this gift of community. When we sit out in nature, we're not just receiving the oxygen from the plants around us, we are receiving this pure, beautiful energy, these vibrations throughout the air, these sounds from the birds, these colors from the flowers. We are receiving. And from that, we must, he says, it is necessary that we give. And so as we just reflect on that, I want to give you this example. I'm going to read to you just real quickly about the Dead Sea. We've all heard of it. We have this idea of this water in the Dead Sea and what it's like. But here's what he tells us of how it connects to this pillar. He says the Dead Sea in the Middle East receives fresh water. Some of us didn't even know that. Think about it. The Dead Sea receives fresh water, but it has no outlet. So it never passes water out. In fact, it receives beautiful, clear water from the rivers. But the water goes bad. It just sits. That's why it's called the Dead Sea. because it receives goodness, yet it does not give. And then he goes on to say, we as humans are just the same. We receive, and we must give. Generosity is the best way of becoming more and more and more joyful. That is why it is the 8th and final pillar of joy. And so I would like for us just to sit for these next few minutes with this idea of these other 7 pillars. There's a receiving in those pillars. And it's from that receiving that now we have this necessity within us to give. When we nurture our perspective, we are receiving perspective and insight and discernment. When we nurture our humility, we are receiving harmony and union between us and the people around us. When we nurture our humor, we are receiving smiles and lightheartedness and happiness. And when we nurture this idea of acceptance, we are receiving the ability to let go of our criticisms, our judgments, and learning just to truly accept. When we receive forgiveness from others, it's a blessing. It's a burden being lifted. It's a wall that's being torn down between us. When we receive gratitude from someone, it's such a connection between us and them. And when we receive compassion from ourselves to ourselves or from someone else, we realize we're not alone. We have people standing in the gap right alongside us. And so I would propose that those 7 gifts, those pillars, it's from that lens that we then give. Think about the Dead Sea. Just picture these rivers coming in with this beautiful, clear, crisp water, and then it just sits. And so as we grow quiet, I want to challenge each of us, myself included, to think of something that you've received in the last little bit. A gesture, a kind word, a break, a gift. And as you see it in these moments of quiet, let it just be the thing you focus your internal vision on. And from that, see if you're inspired then to give. It's from the fullness of our heart, from the light, from the compassion, that we're now equipped and prompted to give. So each of us just think, what have you been the recipient of recently? Sit with that thing, see it. And then just be curious about what you discover about your ability to give. as you continue just to see whatever that item in your life was, that gesture, that gift, that break that you've received lately. I want us to close with just this visual. When I think about the power of generosity, I go back to this ritual that I've been a part of so many times in my many years of living. On Christmas Eve, there are many churches that will do a candlelight service. And it is the most magical and beautiful thing, regardless of your belief system, regardless of anything, to see human beings standing with a candle in their hand that's not lit. And then there's one person at one end of the area wherever the church has gathered, and they've got the light. They have the first candle that's been lit. And then they lean over and they take that light and they light the candle of another one. And then that person turns to the person next to them and they light their candle from their light. And so it goes until seconds later, that church that was dark is now illuminated with light. But it took one person giving their light to make the light of others happen. And what if that one person with the light had just stood there, holding their light and never passing it? It would have been like the Dead Sea. They had the light. It was never shared, and the church remained dark. I don't want to be that person, and I know that you don't either. So let's just stay open in the coming days. There will be opportunities that come across our path many times during the day. And you'll have a chance to have this metaphorical candlelight that you'll be able to pass along to someone. And then when you do that, pay attention to what you receive. The look on someone's face, the relief that they feel, that you see, and sometimes tangibly something coming back to you as well. Just hold that image in your mind and remember, you hold the light, but it's up to us to share it. Generosity. There's a reason the Dalai Lama says that it is the 8th and final pillar. In the coming days, we're going to continue to sit with it just a bit. Because like St. Francis of Assisi said, it is in giving that we receive. Namaste.